Episode 57, Brief Nightly Firefight, April 1943. The month of March is almost over. The front lines have already stabilized again after the winter offensive of the Russian army. I believe that it really wasn't an easy undertaking to withdraw so much materiel and vehicles from the threatened sectors and to move into secure areas as quickly as possible. Here, one may mention German planning and thoroughness with praise, since this working logistic is incomprehensible to me. Certainly, not everything is always immediately available at every sector of the front. But if one considers the dimensions of the Eastern Front and how much material and provisions, as well as ammunition, has to be brought up, that's truly a considerable amount. With these transportation capabilities, many items were then brought to the rear. Of course, many vehicles and also tanks did break down during the withdrawal due to technical defects, and surely not in our sector. It's become quieter. The Russian apparently has lost his offensive momentum, since he did encounter massive defensive positions in many places. He frequently assumed that we'd be easy prey in panicked flight, and was then received by well-camouflaged anti-tank emplacements. And those anti-tank gunners are quite cold-blooded. A master sergeant of the armored reconnaissance told a story of an anti-tank unit which had dug themselves in the same fashion as the Red Army in an anti-tank gun sack. So literally like a roadway at which to the left and right as well at the end, camouflaged anti-tank guns were positioned. First, their own troops would be allowed to pass, and the Russians drove a few kilometers distant in pursuit, being very sure of their prey, full steam into this ambush. The commanding officer led the tanks close in to 200 meters, then all hell broke loose. The 12 T-34 were taken under fire from three sides, and after half of them were already burning or had exploded, the remainder tried to escape, but were destroyed like the others without mercy. At such a location, Ivan won't attempt anything a second time then. One can employ the anti-tank guns elsewhere. This way the Russian had been stopped in many locations. And despite all this, it's very aggravating that we relinquish so much soil. I don't believe with a further advance we will be able to gain ground as easily as last year. We undertake a few supply trips behind the front, since our Rosinante will need a few more days in the repair unit. The turret had suffered more than we'd thought. The turret roof also has some damages from the air attack. Therefore, the turret had to be removed, and now the comrades are working on it. I'm underway with Schmidt in the company chief's field car. We want to go to a neighboring unit which had knocked out some US tanks. I want to take a closer look at them, and Schmidt's supposed to pick up some kind of papers there. After we're done with the paperwork, and there was some hot coffee, we are told the area where the destroyed tanks are sitting. The recovery troops have loaded up the two wrecks and brought them behind the front. We don't take long until we recognize the way to the tank workshop amongst the forest of road signs, and arrive at an old barn where the repair troops have settled in. There, the two shot-up tanks are already sitting. Both have burned out, and that's apparently a weak spot with these tanks. The large cannon is located on the right-hand side of the tank, and then another small one in the traversable turret. I get out and take a close look at the vehicle. The armor is angled, but if one aims low enough, one would have easy play into the lower plate. From the side, built like a closet wall, this tank would certainly be no match for us. I take my time and look at everything quietly. The repair guys are telling us that 6 men sit inside this tank. Now that's pretty tight, and apparently there's no getting out of it if it goes bang, either. The dead Russians were all still sitting in the tank when the vehicle was captured. After an hour, we climb back in and drive back to our unit. The weather is good to us. The rays of the sun are warming my face. Schmidt and I take a break underway. On a small hill, we sit down and munch a few cookies. With that, there's a small schnapps and something to smoke. This way things are quite tolerable. I asked Schmidt how his arm was doing. That was always good for a laugh. But by now, he can already laugh along about it. When we're back, the Sarge tells that now more and more tankers are being sent to the Reich in order to be trained on the new tanks. Whether that wouldn't be something for me, but I wave it off. For now, I want to remain with my crew and Rosinante. Everything else will then find its way. My commander comes to the regimental office and is apparently happy to have found me. He tells me that he's loaned me out to the Ferding crew who are missing a tank gunner. Well, that's it then for the planned comfortable evening of playing cards. I am to report there at 1,600 hours. Said and done, at 3:45 sharp, I'm standing by the tank of Master Sergeant Ferding. He's an old warhorse whom I have known for a long time, and with whom I maintain a friendly relationship. I'm happily greeted and shortly briefed on the situation. We are to stand security and link up with a battle group in the forward area which had led a limited advance, and is now quite beat up on the way home. They were supposed to oppose the forward scouting Russians, then had probably dared to go too far in the battle high, and then were on the receiving end on their part. Yes, I know this. In the high of victory, one may follow behind the opponent overzealously on occasion, and if one has bad luck, it'll give a tremendous bang. We're supposed to move close to 5 kilometers in front of the main battle line and receive the comrades there under a veil of infantry and with 2 armored personnel carriers. It's already dark. I'm not liking that. According to schedule, we stand in position. In the next 20 minutes, the entire group is supposed to appear. We're sitting in the turret and chat. Master Sergeant Ferding, so you Wei, asks me what I think about my senior ensign Ronget. In this case, despite all comradeship, I'm always cautious, remaining very neutral. He tells me that during meetings, the senior ensign always appears a bit snobbish, although he indeed was still quite green. Yes, I also saw it this way. Whether we'd ever bumped heads with each other, I know exactly what he'd like to hear. Surely he's been informed about our dispute during the artillery event, but I let nothing show through. He smiles and states that I was always very loyal, and this was always confirming his opinion he had of me. He tells me further that the old commanders had taken the senior ensign aside and explained to him exactly how things work around here. Also that he should very well listen to his tank gunner if he made a suggestion. I, for my part, would really only go against something if things got really tight for the tank. That's how I know you, Rudolf, Yue finally remarks to me. And with that, the topic of commander of Rosinante is off the table. We're informed that the combat group was now approaching, and after another 10 minutes, the first vehicles are rumbling past us. 12 vehicles and tanks have already gone through when the Panzer IV of the battle group commander stops next to us. He briefly talks to Wei, and then admonishes us that he had a few Russians behind his neck. We promised to take care of that and to provide covering fire accordingly. A further 10 minutes later, we can already hear engine noise, but in the darkness hardly anything can be recognized. I ask Wei what we should do. He states I should look for glowing exhaust pipes, and then fire a few salvos according to my gut instinct. If we'd hit anything, we'd have party illumination. For now, the loader has loaded high explosive shells. I fire at a glowing spot. I catch a vehicle, indeed probably a BT, but after the he shell, the load in an armor-piercing shell right away, and the second shot is spot on. The BT blows up, it becomes pretty bright. Another BT-7 is just turning around and wants to bail. I shoot again, but too fast, the shell misses. Behind it, there's still a truck visible. I'm able to give him a greeting from home along the way. Whoever is still out there haunting around in the dark, has probably got enough for today and takes to running away. 30 minutes later, the grenadiers still fire off a few illumination rounds, but there aren't any Russians present anymore. The infantry gather up and move out, but we form the rear guard. Without further incidents, we return back to our camp. When the after-action conference is over, I report back to my senior ensign in our accommodations, and they have to explain what's happened. Visibly impressed by this nightly firefight, my commander releases me into my quarters. Here, all are already sound asleep after all. It's well past midnight. Those who'd been in action are allowed to sleep longer, and therefore, in the morning, I don't get around organizing some breakfast till 8 a.m. In the tank workshop, there's still a mug of coffee to be had and some bread with sausage. The day could always start out this way. The turret is already back in place on Rosinante, and also the turret roof is looking good again. Tomorrow, the lady would be ready for combat again, the technical officer remarks to me. Well then, we want to see what's still to come. In the afternoon, the crew meet up for a conference. The senior ensign explains that we, as far as Rosinante was fully mission ready again, were going to attack a hill together with a combat detachment. From this hill, the Russian had a good overview over our rear area. There was not a lot of resistance to be expected, but the infantry unit in our left flank needed tank support. They had 2 assault guns, but a tank was also important. So tomorrow morning by 10 o'clock, he wanted to have the tank ready to move out. We should be able to manage that if everything was working. We walk over to the workshop and make preparations for the next day. Assaulting an elevated position. I hope there'll still be some good reconnaissance done beforehand. If they've got anti-tank guns there, it'll be a short ride. But let's wait and see. We're not underway alone after all.